Chapter 1686, Waiting for God's Will. Zhang Yi understood that what Yang Xinxin said was correct. Now they had no way to control the gatekeeper of Hades, so Yang Xinxin's ability had no room to play. Zhang Yi told the others what Yang Xinxin said, and then said, "Now we can only delay time. Then find an opportunity to use the death of love to hurt him." Li Changgong looked at Zhang Yi speechlessly. "Hun Dun, are you a little confused? Death of love. Even if it can be launched, it makes too much noise. I'm afraid it will be detected by the other party during the launch. Have you forgotten how the death of love was blocked by the other party before?" Zhang Yi looked at him with burning eyes and said calmly, "I know, of course I know. But don't forget who I am. I will have a way to make him unable to defend himself."
Seeing
Zhang Yi's confident eyes, Li Changgong also shut up. "Okay, then implement the second set of combat plans. Delay time, then wait for the heavenly punishment that Hun Dun mentioned to come," Shang Dawen said. He was also muttering in his heart, because he himself had never seen the so-called heavenly punishment. But now Zhang Yi would not joke about such things, so they had to do it. Linhai City. Newton and Canero attracted Xuechao and his known ability users here. Xuechao and Nun had just flown from the sea. The moment they appeared in Linhai City, a burst of fire suddenly broke out under their feet. All the explosives that Newton had arranged in this area exploded, directly submerged the two figures. Canero looked at the violent explosion on the coast and said to Newton, "It is difficult to cause effective damage to it with this degree of explosion." Newton said very calmly, "I know, but even if it can only cause a weak impact, it can increase our chances of winning this battle. Especially Dash." He pointed his finger at the sky. "The strong reinforcements we'll get soon will be very effective with such means." Tianhai City was the place he chose to start the war, which is why he chose to come to Tianhai City in advance to inspect the battlefield. According to his judgment, the main battlefield must be in this area. Facts have proved that his data inference is correct. Mathematics will not deceive people. He pushed his glasses, and soon, Deng Shintong's huge Tiandao star bloomed in the sky. The strong ultraviolet light illuminated the area of nearly 1,000 miles, especially around Linhai City, where the intensity of ultraviolet light was abnormally high. Xuechao and Nian flew out of the explosion, and their armor was indeed damaged to a certain extent. They set a trap in advance. I'm really curious. How did they determine that we would fight here? Perhaps they've set the same traps in other places that may become battlefields. Xuechao and Nian had a rapid conversation. At this time, the Tiandao star that appeared in the sky immediately made their bodies feel uncomfortable. It was as if humans entered an area lacking oxygen, and it was inevitable that they would feel dizzy. The armor on their bodies was tough, but after all, it was only a product of technology. While blocking the huge explosion, it would also cause damage to it. This also made it impossible to completely isolate the strong ultraviolet radiation. From the beginning of the duel, Newton took advantage of the geographical advantage to gain the upper hand. This opponent seems to be more difficult to deal with than the previous turtles. Nian cautiously reminded Xuechao. "That's not important," Xuechao said lightly, and a large amount of blood began to flow around him, forming a huge river of blood. Among them, there was the blood of hundreds of thousands of soldiers and civilians in Donghai City. In the face of absolute strength, all obstacles are meaningless. They are just struggling to survive. What they need is not victory, but just to find something to do while the Grand Marshal slaughters the enemy. Xuechao doesn't care about the outcome of this battle at all, because he knows that he can't lose. After waiting for the Hades gatekeeper to deal with the strongest group of the coalition forces, the war will be over. Newton and Carnero came to this battlefield in advance. Newton and Carnero had already practiced this war, so there is no need to say more. Carnero retreated directly, and Newton stood in front. Facing the enemy in the distance, Newton directly raised the scientific hand cannon, atheist, in his right hand. And Carnero in the distance also raised the sniper rifle in his hand. The first target they chose was the black and white commander, Nian. In a 2-on-2 battle, the weaker opponent should be eliminated first, and then the advantage of 2-on-1 will be formed quickly. Carnero's eyes can see through the long distance. Watcher can see through everything, even buildings, and accurately aim at the target. Through everything. He aimed directly at Nien and pulled the trigger. A special bullet wrapped in his supernatural power directly penetrated the void and went straight to Nien. Newton raised the hand cannon in his hand almost at the same time and used the auxiliary aiming function of the tactical mask to lock the enemy. Carnero's ability can penetrate the opponent's defense. Even the most powerful enemy will have a hole in its defense after being hit by him. Newton's hand cannon, on the other hand, was a pure energy shock. So the means of the two's joint battle was for Carnero to break the opponent's defense first, and then Newton would finish it. The two attacked one after the other, and instantly arrived in front of Nien. But Nien's eyes, which had been closed, suddenly opened. Here it comes. Blood Tide, who was dozens of meters away from him, raised his hand, and the thick blood river directly turned into a huge blood-colored ball jade, wrapping the two of them tightly in it. Crack. Carnero's black bullet shot on the surface of the blood-colored ball jade, directly opening a crack. Then, Atheist also accurately bombarded the gap with one blow. With one blow, a huge hole was blasted in Blood Tide's defense. However, Newton and Carnero did not have time to be happy. Because the blood-colored pearl jade condensed by the blood of hundreds of thousands of people began to repair rapidly the moment they blasted the gap. Then, Nien raised his hands and aimed at the already deserted city below. Boom. The earth shook wildly. This deserted city still retained a large number of buildings from the era of human civilization. Tall buildings rose from the ground and were driven by the mind to fly high into the sky and then smashed towards Newton and Carnero. More than a dozen tall buildings fell on top of Newton like toys. Newton was not panicked at all. He raised his right hand, and the Atheist in his hand emerged with golden light. A shell was fired, and the terrifying energy directly blasted the huge building in front of him into pieces. Chapter 1687, The Second Law. The other side has two ability users. One uses long-range attack weapons and has a strong defense-breaking ability. The other uses long-range weapons, but it looks like the attack power is even stronger, and the ability is inexplicable. Xuechao made such a judgment at the first time. In order to further confirm the abilities of Newton and Carnero, he stretched out his right hand, and the huge blood-colored pearls and jade began to melt in an instant, turning into a huge and viscous blood river again. Blood rain. Hua la la. The blood river began to surge wildly, and blood-colored arrows emerged from the blood river. The blood river turned into a rushing river behind him, and it was like a curtain stretching for several kilometers. Densely packed, countless blood arrows were aimed at the direction of Newton and Carnero, and in an instant, heavy rain fell. This large-scale wide-area attack is the best starting point for testing. It can see the opponent's defense ability and whether it has the means to face large-scale attacks. Carnero hid behind Newton and was indifferent to such an attack. Newton raised his head and looked at the sky, and the lenses of his frameless round glasses flashed white light. Newton's second law. The magnitude of an object's acceleration is proportional to the force and inversely proportional to the mass of the object. The direction of acceleration is the same as the direction of the force. As long as a little force is applied in the right way, the direction of an object's movement can be changed. And my ability can even change the existence of matter. Newton stood there. He seemed to have done nothing, but the space in front of him suddenly produced a force that could not be recognized by the naked eye. Densely packed, thousands of extremely sharp blood arrows, while falling towards him, suddenly flew around in a strange posture. The land of Linhai City was instantly dyed bloody, and blood arrows were everywhere deeply inserted into the land, buildings and withered jungles. And where Newton and Carnero stood, within a radius of hundreds of meters, no arrows fell. Distorted my attack. Blood Tide just murmured in a low voice and then quickly changed the battle strategy. He waved his hand. The Styx is rolling back. The blood arrow that shot into the earth and covered a wide area suddenly melted in an instant, turning into a large blood river, which quickly began to rotate around Newton and Carnero. A huge blood river vortex completely surrounded the two of them. The surging waves were like sharp saw teeth, rotating faster and faster, as if they were about to hit them at any time. Canero couldn't help but look more solemn. He could feel the terrifying supernatural power contained in this blood river. Once he was really dragged into it, he would be quickly destroyed. As a sniper, he was not very good at dealing with this situation. Newton kept a calm demeanor and pushed his rimless frame. It is indeed an interesting ability, but before this battle, I have done enough research on you. Data will not lie. The blood tide in the East Sea City was less than a month ago, but it was enough for Newton to collect enough intelligence. The speed of the blood river vortex was getting faster and faster, and Nyen was also on the side, using his telekinesis again. This time, he was not affecting external objects, but directly controlling the bodies of Newton and Canero. In an instant, the two felt a powerful force emerging from nothingness, as if a thick chain bound them. "My lord, I have affected them," Nyen said. "Very good." The blood tide raised his right hand without hesitation. "Devour them, sticks." The huge blood river roared all of a sudden. The sticks rolled back, and the sky-high blood waves rushed over. The jagged waves were like countless electric saws, rushing straight to Canero and Newton. The two did not hesitate to activate the energy in their bodies. Although Nyen's telekinesis was powerful, it was impossible to completely control them at this time. They could only affect their movements. The two tried their best to break free from Nyen's control, and then directly activated the flight function of the combat suit, soaring into the sky to avoid this blood tide attack. "There's no point in hiding. Wherever you run to, my blood river will chase you." Blood Tide just waved his right hand in the air, and like the baton in the hands of the orchestra's conductor, a large number of blood turbines below soared into the sky, chasing Newton and Carnero. Newton looked down, and the atheist in his hand directly launched a shocking attack. The terrifying energy cannon resounded through the sky, and the golden beam penetrated the sticks, causing a large number of blood turbines to collapse. But then, there were still a large number of blood turbines rushing towards the two at an even faster speed. This time, Newton did not hide, but once again activated the power of the first law. Only a little external force can change the trajectory of a 10,000-ton giant ship or a heavy train, causing a huge deviation from the original direction. This is the magic of mechanics. Newton activated his ability, and all the attacks on him were changed in trajectory and rushed in all directions. He and Carnero flew far away and avoided the attack. Then the two immediately launched a counterattack against Blood Tide and Mind. It was still Canero's All Things Penetrate that broke the armor, and then Newton's Atheist launched a powerful area coverage attack. Nyen could feel that the opponent's target was him, so he also hid behind the Blood Tide. The Blood Tide opened the blood barrier again and blocked the second. The two of them joined forces to attack. However, he needed to use a lot of blood to attack, so there was a loophole in his defense. This time, Newton's attack actually pushed him back thousands of meters, and his armor was almost damaged. Their attack is too annoying. Even the silver-armored General Xuechao did not dare to be careless about the human combination in front of him. Although Canero's strength is not strong enough, and his single-soldier combat ability is average, his ability to disintegrate most of the enemy's defense can be effective when paired with an alien with strong attack power. The combination of these two is not a random arrangement. Nyen immediately said, "It seems that we must kill the sharpshooter first." Xuechao's eyes were filled with a cold light. "It doesn't matter. They will definitely not be able to dodge this attack." As soon as he finished speaking, the blood river rushed towards Newton and Canero again. Nyen immediately activated his ability and pulled up dozens of huge high-rise buildings from the ground. Rumble. The city covered with heavy snow was destroyed by him. The entire street was overturned, and a large amount of cement, stone, and soil flew into the sky and then flew towards Canero and Newton. Although such an attack could not directly cause much damage to the two, it could affect the sight of the two snipers and interfere with them. The real killer move was naturally the long river of blood. Chapter 1688, Bloody Storm. The blood tide surged, and the jagged blood turbines made a chi-chi sound. Those huge turbines had a radius of tens or even hundreds of meters. They were densely packed and could cut everything in front of them into pieces at any time. Newton felt something was wrong. The opponent had clearly used this trick just now, and it had no effect on me. Now he uses this ability again. It must be different from before, and he has a strategy to deal with my ability. His brain was working rapidly, but he still chose to retreat with Canero while launching his ability. The first law, twist attack. As his ability was launched, all the blood turbines attacking him were instantly twisted in trajectory and rolled back in different directions. But this time, there were still a large number of blood turbines flying in his direction. The huge blood turbines, chi-chi, sounded and turned rapidly. It was hard to imagine what terrible consequences would occur if they were cut once. Newton already understood what the other party had done. Water has no constant state. If the attack of the long river of blood was directed at the two of them, it would naturally be distorted and bounced out. But this time, the silver armor distorted the flow of the blood river, and the blood turbine's attack no longer had a clear trajectory. In this way, even if Newton activated the power of the first law, a large part of the blood turbines flying elsewhere would be aimed at them. Attacks without a preset trajectory cannot be accurately resisted with abilities. Sure enough, the opponent is smart. It is worthy of being a high-level intelligent creature hiding under the earth. Seeing that the opponent found the flaw in his abilities so quickly, Newton's eyes flashed with surprise. At the same time, there was a hidden excitement. Although he didn't want to see the opponent's strength, if he just defeated the stupid and weak enemy, it would only make him feel boring. Now, he can be sure that this battle will be very exciting. At this time, Canero quickly and skillfully put the black gun behind his back and took out 2 revolvers from his waist with both hands. 1 gold revolver, 1 silver revolver. Although he now uses a sniper rifle as a top gunner and a former Special Forces soldier, he is absolutely proficient in using a pistol. The power of the blood turbine has been weakened by Newton. Of course, there are still blood turbines covering the sky and surrounding the two. But don't forget, as a quick shooter who advocates the art of drawing a gun, his speed of drawing a gun can be faster than the human eye even before he has superpowers. Dance of Rainbow Clouds. When Canero picked up 2 revolvers in his hands, a smile appeared unconsciously on the corners of his mouth, as if he had returned to the free and easy cowboy in the past. The super energy was infused into the 2 revolvers, and then he raised his hands and quickly pulled the trigger. There was almost a residual image of his fingers, and only the sound of gunfire rang out continuously, as if a large string of firecrackers was set off. Every time a shot was fired, a blood turbine would be defeated. In a short moment, they were surrounded by fireworks, and the gunfire of the gold and silver guns filled the sky. The blood river attack that seemed to have no blind spots was actually defeated in less than 1.5 seconds. Well done. Newton praised Canero. You are worthy of being a genius that the Navy has focused on training. You will be a very powerful gunner in the future, Canero. Newton's praise made Canero raise his eyebrows. Now I am. Seeing that this attack did not succeed, Xueqiao did not show a disappointed expression, but laughed instead. There was nothing wrong with his verification, and he had found a way to crack the opponent's ability. And this attack was just a test. The real good show was still to come. Just as Newton was talking to Canero, the blood river running under his feet suddenly moved again. The huge blood river rolled back to the sky as if it had life. Be careful, his attack is coming again, Newton whispered. Xueqiao pointed to the sky with one hand, and the blood river rushed up to the sky and then slowly unfolded in the sky. The sticky blood gathered in one place, suspended above the sky, and turned into a red silk covering the sky. Such a weird scene, coupled with the strong smell of blood in the air, made people feel extremely physically uncomfortable. Taste the feeling of your body exploding. Xueqiao clenched his fist lightly, then turned his palm downward. Hualala dash. A heavy rain began to fall from the sky, and drops of blood fell into the space where the two were. Canero's eyes condensed. At that time, there were more than hundreds of millions of blood beads falling. Even if his gun was faster, it was impossible to block so many blood beads. The most important thing was that they had no idea what the other party wanted to do and where the breakthrough of this move was. Newton said, "According to the intelligence, such an attack will not cause too much direct lethality. According to my communication with Xuanwu, he has a method that can stimulate the blood in the body of an organism and attack the enemy from the inside. And the medium is probably this blood." Canero also remembered this incident. The two looked at each other and immediately began to operate the supernatural powers in their bodies, coating the surface of their bodies with a layer of protective shield. A rainstorm of blood fell, and a strange power followed the blood. The invasion of the two's bodies was directly blocked by the supernatural power protection layer. Seeing that the two were well prepared, Xue Chao didn't care at all. "If you want to block my blood control, you must always activate the supernatural power defense. As long as you make any mistakes, I will detonate the blood in your body. So, you have to be careful." In other words, the two must always consume supernatural power for defense. In this way, their supernatural power consumption will also be greatly increased. The longer the battle lasts, the lower the probability of their victory. "It doesn't matter," Newton said to Canero lightly, "as a secondary battlefield, even if we can't directly win the battle, as long as we can win time for the main battlefield. What's more, it won't be easy for them to delay time. This world is still the home of our human beings. The aliens of the Wulwan Empire cannot fight on the surface for a long time. Whether it is the mysterious rules that cannot be explained, the environment on the surface, or Deng Shintong's Tiandao star, they are all things that greatly restrict them." Newton said this, and stretched out his hand to wipe the body of his hand cannon, atheist. "But if we just passively take the beating, it will be too embarrassing for the Columbia aliens." Chapter 1689. His wife. The atheist in Newton's hand suddenly underwent a strange change. Its body was trembling slightly, like a living thing. If you look closely, you'll find that it has been rising and falling slightly regularly, just like a human heart. Carnero looked at the weapon in Newton's hand and couldn't help but think of a saying. "Most of the people in the Natural Science Association are crazy. Is your atheist a biological weapon?" Carnero asked this question for the first time. Newton nodded, and a trace of tenderness suddenly flashed in his eyes. He glanced at the atheist and said, "She is my wife." Carnero's pupils shrank sharply. "Your wife?" Newton stroked the atheist in his hand. It was still trembling slightly, and the light on its surface was slowly becoming more and more intense. "We are all scientists. After the end of the world, we have been committed to exploring the limits of the human body. We all believe that in the era of great changes, humans can become gods, achieve immortality, and possess powerful and incomparable power. Her physique is very special, with very strong biological compatibility, and can even accommodate various rare materials. This ability is very powerful, but it is a bit useless. Because she is not an excellent fighter, it is difficult to achieve biological evolution with such an ability." Newton's eyes were a little intoxicated, so I thought of a wonderful plan. That is to turn her into a powerful biological weapon. In this way, she can perfectly exert her ability characteristics. Canero didn't know what to say. However, after the end of the world, it was not the first time he had seen such a madman, so he didn't lose his composure in the battle. The atheist in Newton's hand was his wife, so when he used the weapon, he could exert the most powerful power. If his atheist was picked up by the enemy on the battlefield, not only could he not use it, but he was also very likely to be backfired. Under Newton's comfort, the atheist trembled more and more, and the golden light all over his body became almost white. Newton's hand was very powerful, which made it burst out with powerful energy. He raised his hand cannon and aimed it at Xue Chao and Yen in the distant sky. Canero also took out the sniper without hesitation and pulled the trigger. "The name of this attack is Mind Ray?" Newton narrowed his eyes. As he pulled the small trigger, the atheist suddenly trembled violently, and a powerful golden torrent gushed out from the muzzle. The cooperation between the two was still very tacit, and the power of the mind ray finally made Xiuqiao feel a strong sense of oppression. Nian stretched his hands forward. Protect! The mind power formed a huge barrier in front of the two, but it was directly shattered in the moment of being touched by the mind ray. Xiuqiao also condensed a large amount of blood and turned it into a huge blood sphere to block in front of him. Boom! The extremely heavy blood sphere, snap! A crack appeared, and like sunlight piercing through darkness, a golden beam of light shone in. Neither Xiuqiao nor Nian expected that the power of this attack would be so terrible. Just as they did not expect that they were facing 2 Epsilon-level aliens, but in fact, there were 3. This attack directly tore through their defenses and hit them hard. The 2 flew backwards more than 10 kilometers away, and their armor also showed obvious shatters. Large pieces of armor fell off, exposing their bodies to the surface environment. The cold air and the strong ultraviolet rays directly caused their skin to change color. It was as uncomfortable as a human falling into a high-temperature environment of more than 100 degrees. I didn't want to use this trick. Newton looked at the atheist with some apology and gently stroked its body. Because every time you use Psychic Ray, it will cause irreparable damage to Karina. Canero looked at the somewhat sad Newton and couldn't help but pity this madman in his heart. Newton, be alert. Don't lose points. The battle is not over yet. He reminded. Newton raised his head and looked into the distance and said coldly, I know. After enduring the joint attack of the two, Xiuqiao and Nian suffered some damage. What they could not accept the most was the broken armor. Imagine what would happen if humans entered the deep sea of tens of thousands of meters without diving suits and oxygen masks. Fortunately, the lizard men once lived on the surface, so they didn't have to worry about the problem of oxygen, but the huge difference in environment still made them very uncomfortable. Damn guy. Are we too careless after all? No, it's just that the difference in strength between the enemy we faced last time and this time is too big, so we have an illusion. Xiuqiao gritted his teeth, his eyes full of murderous intent. And now, I have to be serious. He took a deep breath, and the long river of blood in the air suddenly rushed to his body from all directions. Along the gap in the armor, it quickly sank into his body. Using blood to attack is just one way of using blood control. Originally, it was only used to bully those with low strength. But now, I recognize your strength. Let me show you my true strength. A large amount of blood poured into Blood Tide's body, and then his body and armor were quickly stained with a thick layer of blood, including his eyes, where you couldn't see the pupils, only the rich blood light. The injuries on his body were also being repaired quickly, and even under the ultraviolet radiation, they were restored to their original state. The source of power for living things comes from blood. In my blood river, there is the source of life for hundreds of thousands of lives. So, as long as I have a drop of blood that is not exhausted on the battlefield, I will be immortal. Xiuqiao roared to the sky. He finally activated his most powerful skill, Blood Reward, absorbing a large amount of blood energy at one time, which was also an extremely powerful load for his body. But it can allow him to have combat power beyond his original ability index in a short period of time. The momentum burst out by the blood-colored figure in the air made Newton and Canero's faces become solemn. Xiuqiao opened his right arm, and a stream of blood gushed out from his palm, quickly condensing into a huge sickle more than 5 meters long. Holding the sickle, he slashed at the two of them at a very long distance. Swish! A sickle passed through the air, and the two had no idea what he had done, because there was no energy body to attack them. But the next moment, Newton felt that the blood in his body was boiling directly, almost breaking through his blood vessels and bursting out. Chapter 1690. Psychic Rays. Canelo's 7 orifices were gushing blood. Even if he used his supernatural power to form a shield to block the surface of his body, the blood tide that greatly increased his strength at this time still made it impossible for him to completely isolate himself from the influence of this power. He felt a little heavy in his heart and could only cast his eyes on Newton, hoping that Newton could exert his ability at this time and solve the current crisis. But it didn't matter if he didn't look, and this look made him terrified. Because on Newton's face, blood from all 7 orifices was also flowing down hideously, and even his arms were dripping with blood. "It's over," Canelo thought in despair. If even the black chariot-level Newton couldn't stop the opponent's attack, let alone him? Newton was suspended in the air without moving, but suddenly, a tragic smile appeared on his blood-stained face, and he looked at the blood tide with a playful look in his eyes. In the distance, the blood tide that had just released its ability, and the body instantly gushed out a large amount of blood. A large amount of blood gushed out from his nasal cavity, mouth, eyes, ears, and capillaries in his body. Ahem. Xuechao covered his body with his hands, his eyes full of disbelief. How could this happen? What exactly is this guy's abilities? He was the one who attacked Newton and Canero, but why was he injured? And it looked like he used his ability to attack his own body. Newton wiped the blood off his face and quickly injected plasma and drugs into his combat suit. Newton's third law. Between 2 interacting objects, the action and reaction are always equal in magnitude and opposite in direction. In simple terms, the action of forces is helpful. When you use your ability on me, the injury I suffer, your body will also suffer the same amount of damage intact. At this time, what we are competing for is who has a stronger ability to withstand injuries. After Newton injected plasma and drugs, his body recovered rapidly. With this ability, he would naturally prepare to heal himself in advance. Even when he was taking the hit, he deliberately relaxed his defense, causing himself to take more damage in order to counterattack Blood Tide. But Blood Tide didn't expect that he would be backfired by his ability, so he was hurt even more. Canero gritted his teeth and took this opportunity to raise his gun and shoot. Nian quickly blocked in front of Blood Tide, opened his hands, and a powerful telekinesis directly blocked the 2 of them. Bang! A shot was fired, and the black bullet instantly drew a long black line in the air and came in front of Nian. This attack pierced through Nian's body, like piercing cotton. But there was no excitement on Canero's face, because immediately afterwards, the illusion in front of him was shattered, and Nian and Blood Tide were not in that position at all. You used telekinesis to distort the light, so my attack was deviated, right? Let me do it. Newton wiped the blood under his nose, and then raised the hand cannon. Atheist, transformed by his beloved wife. Mind rays. This cannon fiercely bombarded the area where Nian and Xuechao were. This kind of large-scale attack could not be avoided by using the trick of distorting light. Moreover, at this time, Xuechao was caught off guard and seriously injured. Humph. Xuechao's eyes were full of naked killing intent. It was indeed his own attack that really caused him serious damage, but as long as the long river of blood did not dry up, he would not be killed. However, the ultraviolet rays shining from the sky became more fierce, and now he felt as if he was steamed in a big pot. Especially when the capillaries in his body burst and blood flowed out, this feeling became more and more obvious. He clenched his right fist, condensed a huge blood barrier, and merged with Nian's mind barrier to block Newton. Boom! The collision of the 2 forces erupted with terrifying power. This attack was barely blocked by Xuechao and Nian. But then, Newton roared again, mind rays. Canero behind him looked a little dazed. Huh. Didn't you say that using this move will cause your wife to suffer irreparable injuries? Man, you really don't look distressed when you use it. Newton raised the Atheist and fired a cannon directly. When he used the Atheist, it was like a husband and wife doubles, so the power was naturally strong. Mind rays. Mind rays. While Blood Tide's injuries had not yet fully recovered, Newton continued to attack. Canero behind him was already numb at this time. His face was like a poker card, and he used his abilities dully to cooperate with Newton's attack. Just now he was still sighing for the perverted and twisted couple's feelings, but now it seems that it is a complete waste of emotion. After the continuous attacks, Blood Tide and Nian had to choose to retreat, because they were already struggling to resist the attacks. And the light on the Atheist began to dim. Newton carried the hand cannon and shouted to Canero, "Chase! We must kill them today. We can't let people underestimate the strength of the Colombian aliens. He raised his hand cannon again and chased after Blood Tide and Nyen. After the distance between the two sides reached a certain distance, he directly raised the atheist and aimed it at the two people in the distance. Blood Tide and Nyen Li had already felt the oppression at this time. If it were normal, they could still fight, but the geographical disadvantage made them dare not fight with all their strength. So Blood Tide chose to delay, waiting for the gatekeeper of the underworld to end the battle. Seeing Newton and Carnero chasing after him, Blood Tide said to Nyen, "Their attack power is weakening. It can be seen that the guy's hand cannon has reached its limit due to frequent firing. Block this attack, and then use the force to retreat into the sea." The two of them made a battle plan and released the barrier. Because Newton and Carnero were exhausted at this time, it was impossible to penetrate their defense with one shot. Newton's hand cannon was aimed at their ability barrier, Carnero's bullet was the first to shoot, and the mind ray followed closely. Just when Blood Tide and Mind thought that this attack could be blocked, suddenly, they felt that the superpowers in their bodies were disordered, and the deployed barrier began to become unstable. Newton showed a cold smile at the corner of his mouth. Newton's first law: all objects always maintain a state of rest or uniform linear motion under the condition that they are not affected by external forces. However, I can exert external force to interfere with the ability release of the superpowers. Make their superpower release unstable.